thanks so much for joining us, man. I know you're a busy man. There's a lot of things going up there in the Jacksonville area. Continued success, man. You're crushing it up there, buddy.
Yeah, yesterday was interesting. Meeting a guy that obviously you're very familiar with in Liam Coen. His initial address here to the media and quite a few dignitaries actually made it in, and it was. I thought it was an interesting press conference. They always win the presser. I mean, it's very rare not to, but I thought that. He was a little bit nervous. Obviously, he showed that he was excited. It wasn't like one of these deals where it was a rehashed coach who's been through it 3 years ago. Doug Peterson came in here a couple of years after winning a Super Bowl, and it was, one of those kind of expected type of press conferences. I thought yesterday with Liam Coen was totally different.
Yeah, and Rick, when you look at Liam Coen and the situation with him leaving Tampa Bay for Jacksonville, what was your take? Because I always think it's so, it's so unique and so be able to see things from different perspectives. Obviously, everybody here in Tampa, like, they can't stand how it went down. They wish he was a little bit more transparent. But was the initial reaction there in Jacksonville like, hey, regardless of what he did to get here, he's our guy. This is one of the guys that we wanted?
Well, I'm very surprised. I still am. I mean, when I had heard, I think it was Wednesday, that he was out, there was no way it was going to happen. Then a few hours later, Trent Baalke was fired. Then I guess he sneaks out in the middle of the night, late Thursday or early Friday, and he's back on the table. I didn't see that coming. Even though it was brought to my attention, I thought that they would go in a different direction. Obviously, it wasn't handled the right way, and I caught a little bit of flack here because I said I thought it was a Bush move to do what he did. But when you triple a guy's pay, even if he's going to get $4.5 million as the coordinator there in Tampa, then all of a sudden you're offering 13, 14 million, whatever in fact it is. It's understandable. Ethically, could he have done it differently? Sure. They're not, answering the phone calls and well over a day from Tampa Bay. And, the flip side of it is I don't know if there's a perfect way to do it. I grew up in Boston, and Michael Hawley's book, Patriot Reign, is one of the great sports books of all time. And, it talks about the first Super Bowl I ever covered back in '96 when, Parcells didn't fly back with the Patriots after they lost to the Packers, and then all that stuff with Bill Belichick. Was he going to get the job? Bill ended up going to New York. Pete Carroll got the job. And then a couple of years later, they announced Bill Belichick to replace Bill Parcells in New York. And a day later, he says, I don't want the job, and ended up being a part of the trade going over to the New England Patriots. So there have been examples of this before. Josh McDaniels has done it. Right. It's always going to leave a sore spot on the place that they leave. And, that is the case right now in Tampa.
How excited is the fan base and just people in Jacksonville just being able to possibly unlock what Trevor Lawrence can do to really live up to those lofty expectations that a number one overall pick has?
Well, that's the big deal. I mean, it's been 4 years of wasted talent for Trevor Lawrence. He has one playoff win. We were told that he's a generational talent. I think they paid him too soon. I would have let him play out his fifth year. They paid him a year ago, so now you have all this money, $275 million guaranteed, invested in a guy who's missed 8 games over 2 years, has had 7 different injuries, has had 2 concussions, has had 2 surgeries on his non-throwing shoulder, if you consider the one he had as well coming out of Clemson. My only thought on this, my initial guy was Ben Johnson. He's who I wanted. Liam Coen, I certainly did a lot of work on. Still an open book. I mean, only 18 games in his career that he has actually called plays. I think that is something that is very intriguing. But the way that I looked at this was get a guy who's going to be with Trevor Lawrence for a long period of time. You don't want a Tampa Bay situation where you lose Canellis because you play well, where you lose Cohen because you play well. I want the head coach to call plays. I want this to be an Andy Reid, Pat Mahomes. I want this to be a Sean Payton with Drew Brees for 15 years, or Sean McVay now with Matthew Stafford. That was my whole approach on this. Get a guy in who can work year after year after year with Trevor Lawrence and watch him evolve. And if you become a good football team and they start plucking away coaches, okay, it hurts, but still the nucleus is in place with Trevor Lawrence and Liam Coen. So that's what I wanted more than anything. And, I've looked at Tampa's offense. My girlfriend's an Oklahoma graduate, so I watch Baker Mayfield and Tampa either live or on tape every single week. And I love what Liam Coen did. Jacksonville was so predictable offensively. Everything was out of the shotgun. Even 3rd and 1, they'd run out of a shotgun. It was really dumbfounded. And I'm excited about what I believe Liam Coen will be able to bring Trevor Lawrence and this football team.
Yeah, his pre-snap motion, fantastic. What he was able to do to some of these tight ends to get them the block that really struggled blocking in years past. Really, really good stuff there. And that's something I don't think anybody in Jacksonville certainly has to worry about. It's kind of weird, Rick. Nowadays you're getting the coaches and then the GMs follow, where the GM for so many years that was, everything it trickled down. All right, you get your GM, he's the decision maker. Then you come to decide on a head coach. What do you make of this kind of newfound way that it's being done in the NFL? And who do we think that, could be that guy? Because I know Shad came out and said something about trying to have something done by February. Well, the draft will be here before you know it.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, this organization needs a total reboot when it comes to their front office. I don't like hiring the coach before the GM. Maybe it's the old school in me, but to me, you get a general manager, you hire your coach, you allow your coach to get his coordinators and his assistant coaches, and then the general manager becomes responsible for free agency in the NFL draft. Now, Jacksonville's tried that. Shad Khan's been here for 13 years. He's had 3 winning seasons. He's had 1 double-digit win season. That was 10 games. He hired 2 general managers. Hasn't worked out. Dave Caldwell, I remain friends with, still lives here in Jacksonville, even though he works for the Philadelphia Eagles. It just didn't work out with Dave. Trent Baalke took the interim off. Didn't work with Trent. The coaches they've brought in here hasn't worked. So I guess they're going to do things differently now. Considering it hasn't worked, you can make the case that why not do it this way? Right. And whenever I raise this with my listeners are like, well, let's hire a coach who picks the GM. Let's hire a coach who picks the players. And I'm like, it's a 39-year-old guy who's never done it before. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of brilliant people in the NFL. Hire these people, bring them in. And, Shad Khan yesterday talking about how he has until February 28th to bring in a general manager. I'm like, you got the Senior Bowl practices going on right now. You got the East-West Shrine Game practices going on right now. You have games Thursday and Saturday. Who's representing Jacksonville? Free agency right around the corner. Major decisions this football team has to make as far as, cutting some veterans with some very high cap figures. Then you got to turn around and get things ready, for the new league year in the middle part of March, and it's every day's going by. So I don't love what's happening now. I do like the names that have been thrown around to come in as the new general manager, but I'm just a little surprised that it's taking this long. I think that's the biggest concern with Shad Khan, who is a brilliant man. He's a very cordial man. I like Shad an awful lot. He's not a great football man, and he needs to surround himself right now with football people. If you look at Jacksonville's staff and compare it to the best teams in the NFL, they are so understaffed. It's amazing. I mean, it's Tony Khan, his son, and it was Trent Baalke, and that's it. Now they've added my buddy Tony Baselli, who I did the Tony Baselli show with going back to 1996. Plus I worked with him on the Jaguars radio network. I love Baselli, but Baselli should be a conduit. He should be a liaison between Shad Khan and the coach, Shad Khan and the general manager. You can't expect Tony Baselli to put things together scouting-wise and all of a sudden make you draft picks. He's never done it before. That's not his expertise. He's a great football man, but he needs to be in the building for that role. So, yeah, this is still a major work in progress. The Jaguars have a lot of things to do.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about you gave me your impression. What's the overall impression of Shad Khan there, from the fan base? I mean, because he's a guy, it doesn't seem like he's, pinching any pennies, willing to spend on practice facilities, new stadiums, getting Urban Meyer and Charlie Strong involved with his son's wrestling promotion. Like he seems to be, kind of open, but I mean, it's one thing to be open. It's another thing. Like you got to be able to make sure that the right people are in place to make the football moves, as you alluded to.
Yeah, that's always been my biggest concern with Shad is that he doesn't have an inner circle. And if he does, he's been very silent about it. I mean, all of these owners have people within the league that they trust, that they can go to if they have to make a major decision. And I just told you basically the brain trust that
Right.
Shad Khan has had. And there needs to be more. Even though those people are not the final decision makers, you need more opinions. You need more eyes and ears and a voice to say, I think we should be doing this. I think we should be doing that. And there's not enough of that. You mentioned Urban Meyer. I heard from an impeccable source 4 years ago when he was hired. Shad Khan will never say no to a football related issue. You talk about liquid cash, the man has got it. Look at the amount of money he spent the last several years in free agency. And to credit Urban Meyer, they totally rebuilt their facility. The Miller Electric Center is the best right now in the NFL. You name it, they have it. Urban Meyer asked for the world, and he got it. So it is an incredible facility. It's state of the art, and it's really ahead of its time. And again, Shad Khan is going to spend the money, but I think the problem that he has is that everything he does turns into gold. He's worth $12.2 billion. He still hasn't been able to identify and surround himself with great football people. And that is what he needs to do right now. He's got to find guys that he can trust and guys who aren't afraid to go up to him and give their opinion on what needs to be done with the football team. That has been lacking here in Jacksonville.
Rick, what's the involvement of his son, Tony? I'm a big wrestling guy going back to when I was knee high to a grasshopper. And, I know they're invested in Fulham as well over. I'm a big Premier League fan as well. What's Tony's involvement? Because I think for like the wrestling fan base, we look at, he gets his pet project here and the wrestling and these big stars. He signs all these guys making millions of dollars, but then you see him with the neck brace at the draft. Like he's a part of this process too for the Jaguars. But I guess the question from the outsiders is, how involved is he?
I love Tony. I mean, Tony's just a blast. He really is. A few years ago in London, I spent like the entire week with him. We flew in from Cincinnati after a loss there and then spent a week in London. And it was a place called the Grove that was kind of away from everything in downtown London, and really got to know Tony very well during that week. And I mean, this guy doesn't sleep. He's a head of analytics, which I'm not a huge fan of football related. I mean, just look at all these chasing points early with 2-point conversions we've seen recently in the NFL. But whether you like it or not, it's a big part of today's game. So he heads up that department. Absolutely, he's involved with what's going on soccer-wise at Fulham, and had a chance to go to a game out there as well. It's pretty neat. I'm really not a soccer guy, but I enjoyed it. And then obviously he's running the everything that's involved with his wrestling franchise. His opinion matters. It does. And I know that during the Caldwell Coughlin situation, there was a difference in opinion that Tony Khan is a smart guy, but is he too involved in what this football team is trying to do? He was Trent Baalke's absolutely favorite guy. I mean, that's the only reason why Trent Baalke stuck around here as long as he did, is because Tony Khan absolutely admired Trent Baalke and thought he was a fantastic guy. The other side of it is we honestly just don't know. I mean, I'd love to be able to sit here and say, yeah, Tony Khan's responsible for day 3 picks and 6th and 7th round picks and undrafted free agents, but has very little say, on Thursday night and Friday night. It's been kind of, mass confusion as trying to figure out everything that's going on. Because again, when I look at the Khans, brilliant business people, but certainly not the best football people. Now, I think Tony Khan knows a lot more than his dad does, because he absolutely is involved with the football team, analytically speaking. And he has his dad's ear. Again, the only 2 people who have had Shad Khan's ear over the last several years is Tony Khan and Trent Baalke.
Rick, before I let you go, I want to ask you, what is the Jacksonville kind of, all right, this is what we got to do to be competitive in 2025? Because you look at the division, we know Houston, the bee's knees with CJ Stroud, but You look at the Colts, okay, you kind of have an idea of what Steichen and Anthony Richardson are, and then the Titans seem to be towards the bottom end. But like, what about the Jags? Like when they're looking at it, all right, you got Brian Thomas, you got some good pieces. Like in order for them to take a step forward, what do they have to do to this roster?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of different things that factor into that. First off, you mentioned it's a very weak division. There's no reason why they can't flip the switch and turn around.
Right.
A lot of people think that C.J. Stroud dropped off in his second year, and obviously we saw the firing of Bobby Slowick just the other day. So Houston right now is in a little bit of turmoil, and it feels like they don't know what they're doing. Even at quarterback in both Tennessee and Indianapolis. I think the first thing that needs to be considered here in Jacksonville, and it's the one thing that Liam Coen said yesterday that almost made me fall off my chair, is he was asked, what is the most excited thing that you are about coming here to and coaching in Jacksonville? And he said leadership. And I was like, whoa. It's like there's no leaders on this football team. This is and to me, the leaders have always been in the ditch, particularly the offensive line. That is the identity of a great football team, is a tough offensive line. The teams here in the 90s, when they went to 2 AFC championship games in 96 and 99, it was Leon Searcy and Tony Baselli and Dave Weidel and that great offensive line. They were dominant in the locker room. They weren't running into the training room when the reporters came in, okay? This offensive line doesn't have a voice. It hasn't had a voice in a very long period of time. So we said leadership. Now, if you win, can all of a sudden leaders emerge? I've seen the maturation process in 4 years of Trevor Lawrence. Josh Hines-Allen, Foye Oluokun, a little bit more lead by example as opposed to being very vocal. But I think that's a big part of it. The second is that they have to get better in the interior offensive line. They're okay at tackle with Harrison and Walker. They're okay at edge with Walker and Hines-Allen. But then you look at the interior offensive line and the interior defensive line, that is very soft. That is very weak. And that is something that he said several times yesterday, alluding about physical football. And I'm aware, Tampa, even though, you've won 3 straight divisional titles, what'd you rush for? Just over 80 yards 2 years ago. He comes in, brings you to 150 yards a game, rushing. Jacksonville has some talented backs. They do. They just have the soft interior offensive line. So the first thing you need to do is run and stop the run. And if you can do that, then that'll open things up a little bit more for Trevor Lawrence. So for me, that's the biggest thing that needs to be fixed, the physical style of play, particularly in the ditch, and then finding a way to successfully run the football. The last 5 games of the year, Jacksonville averaged 69 yards a game rushing. You can't win in this league if you can't run the football. And that's what he's going to be forced with. And, I hope Jacksonville's got great draft capital. They also have a lot of money to spend. And everyone's like, defense, defense, defense. And I just scream and I yell. I'm like, you're crazy. You spent all this money on Trevor Lawrence. Fix your offense. Fix your offensive line. Every team can't be perfect. No one is. But do what you hopefully can do best, and that is build around Trevor Lawrence. You want to find out if Trevor Lawrence can actually play or not. And you don't want to put all your resources in defense and have a patchwork offensive line and say, yeah, maybe we should have done something with the offensive line. There goes year 5, and Trevor didn't, take us to where people believe they should be. So if I had any say, it would be fix that offensive line, get a number 2 wide receiver, and put most of my funds on the offense.
Yeah, you got that right. The best teams in the NFL build from the inside out. And when you do that, man, you can even make up for some of the lack of skill and maybe some injuries like we've seen from teams around the league. You may lose a wideout or 2 for a couple of weeks, but if you're strong in the interior, that helps out in a big way. If you want to be smarter, listening to Jacksonville Radio, check out Into the Night. Our guy, Rick Ballou, 1010 XL, 92.5 FM. Working on the Jaguars radio broadcast, FSU graduate, does a little bit of everything. Rick, thanks, man. You enlightened the hell out of me, man, and I appreciate it. And continued success. I always try to pop in and listen to different radio stations around the country, especially at night when I get some time, and you crush it, man. So keep up the great work, and have a great rest of your week.
All right, Jay. Take care. Thank you, man.
You got it.